So these are the parts that make up the rear brake system. This is the foot pedal and the pivot bolt with a couple of flat washers and a nut. And then this is the adjustment for the rear brake stoplight switch that threads into this hole here. And then this is the arm that connects to the brake pedal arm with this little special bracket. And the other end connects to the lever arm here, which attaches to a pivot shaft, which is this here. And it has a cam on it, and the cam actuates the brake pads, opening them up when it turns. Now, there's also, for the bolt that holds this arm, a little mechanism with a pointer that indicates whether the brake shoes are being worn down too far. Now, I got new springs and a special plastic piece which reduces the squeal of the brakes, and it fits on one of the arms. So the cam assembly also has a flat washer on the inside, and on the outside a felt washer that goes on it. Now, the shaft that actuates the brakes has 4 O-rings to help seal it, and it goes in this way. And the other thing that's on it is a large flat washer that goes down up against the cam assembly like that, and then it slides here through the rear drive, and then this is the cam surface that actuates the brake pads. I put a little brake grease on this pivot and on the cam, so it will lubricate the shoes as they move across the surface. Now, the top shoe has a D, and that's going to fit up here like this. And then the bottom shoe has an S, and it's going to fit down below like this. Now, the brake springs, the return springs if you will, are the same length, and they fit into these 2 holes on the brake shoes. And I'll show how I install the shoes and the springs. Now, I start by putting one spring on the shoes next to the pivot so I can slide them on here. Well, it's fighting me. Okay. There we are. Now, there's a snap ring that goes on that secures that end, so I'm going to put that on. There it goes. Okay, so that's secured, which is what we want. And then I'm going to hang the other spring through the holes here. Of course, it fights you a little bit. There, got that one. And then I got that one. Now, what I'm going to do is just bend the 2 of them, the 2 shoes, up along the shaft here. There. Okay. Okay, and now make sure my snap ring is all the way in, because I don't think it quite is. There it is. Okay, so that's how you get the shoes and the springs on. Now I installed the rubber vibration damper with the flat side against the brake shoe, and the fits around that spring. You only need one, and it's the rear spring. Now to get it in, I temporarily put the lever arm on, and then I used it to open up the shoes, and then I get enough clearance that I can slide the rubber sleeve over the spring. So I'm going to install the foot pedal assembly, and it slides, if you pull it forward so it's just about touching the tube, it'll slide up and in, and I'm going to let it hang there because I need to connect the rod, and I need to be able to get to where the pin goes in. Now to install the rear brake rod onto the pin hole on the foot pedal, I balance the rod on the shock absorber and push the pedal up, and then I can slide the rod over the foot pedal and slide the pin through the hole, and then I rotate it up to snap around the collar here. It's fiddly, but I got it done. Now the pivot bolt for the brake pedal has a flat washer on both ends, so I just slide the brake pedal down until I can get the hole to line up and run it through, and then on the back side I'll put the flat washer and the locking nut. By the way, I also put a little wheel bearing grease on the shank of the bolt before I put it in. The other thing I'm going to install is the adjustable bolt that pushes down on the brake light switch for the rear brake, and I'm going to use two nuts, one on top, one on bottom, to hold it on the tab in the foot pedal. Now the brake shoe pivot rod comes out, and there's a felt washer that goes on the outside like that, and then this is the arm that fits on it. It's a spline shaft, and the arm is splined. One side with the BMW logo is a big hole, and the other side are tapped threads for the bolt that holds it on. So the big hole goes to the rear and it slides on, and I'll tap that on. Now the brake rod has a barrel, and the barrel fits through these holes, and then the wing nut gets tightened up to adjust the brakes. Now I inserted a screwdriver in the slit, which opened it up a little, and then I took and slid it and then tapped it with a plastic mallet to get it to seat. So I'm going to mount the rear wheel on the rear drive, but before I did that, I sprayed a clean shop towel with some brake cleaner and wiped down the brake shoes to be sure there's nothing on them, and I also cleaned the inside of the drum on the wheel. Now there's a cone that fits over each of the studs that goes on like that. And then the nuts go on like that. And you don't want to use any anti-seize or lubricant or anything on these bolts, just dry. And I'll tighten those up to the torque spec, and then I can adjust the brakes. Now that I've got the wheel mounted, I adjusted the wing nut and I rotated the tire until I could hear the shoes just rubbing, and then I backed it off a turn, and that seems to have them adjusted. Now this is the bolt that pushes down on the rear brake switch, and when the lever is pushed, the switch opens, which is to say it turns on the brake light. So that's on and that's off, and I adjusted the two nuts here so that as I just put a little bit of pressure, about like that much, the brake light goes on. So I've got the rear brakes installed. So the rear wheel is installed and the rear brake is installed. So it's really beginning to look a lot like a real motorcycle again.